They told you Stoicism was about staying calm, about being unbothered, about pretending not to care. But that's a lie. Stoicism is not calmness. It is a weapon. It's the reason emperors didn't crumble under the weight of nations. It's the reason billionaires stay clear when markets collapse. It's the reason prisoners survived years of torture without breaking. And here's the truth no one tells you. This philosophy isn't just for the powerful. It's for the ordinary. It's for you. Because the moment you master it, the world no longer controls you. You control yourself. And the man who controls himself cannot be broken. So ask yourself, will you keep living as a slave to chaos? Or will you discover the mindset that built kings out of nothing? Keep watching, because once you hear this, you will never see life the same way again. I want to tell you the truth about Stoicism. Not the Instagram quote version. Not the coffee mug version. Not the be calm and unbothered you've probably heard. I'm talking about the real thing. The philosophy that emperors leaned on when they ruled half the world. The mindset that prisoners of war clung to when they were tortured in silence. The framework that billionaires and CEOs secretly use when everyone else around them is panicking. Stoicism isn't about pretending not to feel. It's about learning what's worth feeling. And that's why most people never understand it. Think about your own life. How often do you waste energy worrying about things you cannot control? Traffic, opinions, promotions, the stock market. Your mind runs in circles, chasing outcomes that were never yours to command. And when you finally get what you wanted, you move the goalpost. You say, if only I had more. This is the curse of mediocrity. Endless craving, endless disappointment. Now, imagine someone else in that same storm. Same traffic. Same insults. Same setbacks. But they stand like a mountain. Unmoved. Calm. Clear. Focused. That is a Stoic. Do you see the difference? One man is a slave to the world. The other is free, even in chains. Here's the paradox most people don't see. The more successful you become, the more fragile you are. If you don't have this philosophy, wealth looks like freedom. Fame looks like power. But both are chains if you can't control yourself. You live in fear of losing what you have. You live in anxiety about what people think. And the higher you climb, the heavier the chains. Why do you think so many powerful men break down? Why do athletes choke under pressure? Why do CEOs burn out? Because they mastered their field, but not themselves. Stoicism is the antidote. It whispers, you cannot control the world. But you can control your mind. And when you finally get this, when you stop trying to rule the uncontrollable and instead rule yourself, you become unshakable. Do you see why emperors needed it? Why generals clung to it? Why billionaires read Marcus Aurelius in secret? Because the storms only get bigger at the top. And without Stoicism, even kings drown. Now, let me tell you something dangerous. This philosophy is not only for the rich or the powerful. It was born for slaves. For soldiers. For ordinary men living in chaos. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoics, was literally a slave. His body was broken, his freedom stripped away. Yet, he said, you may fetter my leg, but not even Zeus himself can conquer my will. Think about that. A man in chains, more free than a king. So, here's the problem. We live in a world that makes us weak. It teaches us to chase things we can't control. It tells us to measure our worth by likes, by salaries, by titles, by things that can vanish overnight. And most people fall for it. They waste their lives in mediocrity. They react instead of acting. They crave instead of creating. They are tossed around by every storm, every rumor, every shift in fortune. That is not life. That is slavery. And unless you learn what Stoicism really is, you will stay a slave. But if you learn it, truly learn it, you will hold a weapon that kings have used, soldiers have used, and modern giants still use today. A weapon that makes you calm in chaos. Clear in confusion. Untouchable in failure. Because Stoicism is not about escaping life. It is about entering life with armor. And if you are still with me, if you want to know why the richest, the strongest, the most powerful men in history and today are drawn to it, then listen closely. Let me ask you something. Why do you think emperors, billionaires, generals, and athletes, people who seem to have everything, still sit in silence, reading the words of dead philosophers? It's because Stoicism is not a luxury. It's survival. The higher you rise, the more dangerous the air becomes. Wealth blinds you. Fame isolates you. Power tempts you. And if your mind is weak, all of it will break you. That's why Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, wrote in his journal every night, reminding himself not to be corrupted by anger, greed, or praise. That's why Seneca, one of Rome's richest men, wrote letters to himself about poverty and death, as if he owned nothing. That's why Admiral James Stockdale, a prisoner of war, survived years of torture because he carried the words of Epictetus in his mind. Different times, different worlds, same weapon. Now look at today. Tim Ferriss, a best-selling author and investor, calls Stoicism an operating system for thriving in high-stress environments. Tom Brady, the quarterback with more rings than most teams, built his career on discipline, focus, and resilience. Stoic virtues in motion. Jack Dorsey, running Twitter under constant fire, leaned on Stoic practices to stay grounded. Warren Buffett, worth more than nations, still lives modestly and ignores market noise, a living embodiment of Stoic temperance. Why do they do it? Because money cannot buy peace. Fame cannot buy clarity. Power cannot buy. Only philosophy can. Think about it. What happens when the stock market crashes overnight? The weak panic, sell everything, lose sleep, lose sanity. But the Stoic investor stays calm. He knows markets are outside his control. He acts on reason, not fear. What happens when critics tear you apart online? The weak crumble, beg for validation, live in anxiety. But the Stoic creator stands firm. He knows reputation is smoke. He focuses on his craft, not the noise. What happens when life blindsides you with loss, betrayal, failure? The weak see disaster. The Stoic sees training, opportunity, fate giving him weight to lift. This is why powerful men love Stoicism. It doesn't just keep them calm. It keeps them strong. Wealth is dangerous because it breeds addiction to more. But Stoicism whispers, wealth is indifferent. It can add comfort, but it cannot add virtue. So even billionaires cling to this truth, because without it, they drown in their own success. Fame is dangerous because it enslaves you to opinion. But Stoicism whispers, what others think is outside your control. Their praise or blame is nothing. So even celebrities cling to this truth, because without it, they live and die by every headline. Power is dangerous because it corrupts. But Stoicism whispers, the only true power is over yourself. So even emperors cling to this truth, because without it, they become tyrants. Do you see it now? The philosophy of slaves became the lifeline of kings. Because no matter how high you rise, the battlefield is always the same. It is not out there. It is in here. And here's the part most people miss. Stoicism isn't just for those at the top. It's for anyone who wants to think like them. You don't need to be a billionaire to benefit. You don't need to be a general or a superstar. You just need to be human. Because life will test you with the same storms. Fear, loss, betrayal, chaos. The question is, will you break like the crowd? Or will you stand like the kings? Now that you know why the powerful cling to it, let me take you deeper. Because Stoicism is not just a shield. It is a weapon. I want you to imagine life as a battlefield. Every day, arrows fly at you, insults, setbacks, betrayals, failures, losses. Most people run naked into this war, unarmed, unshielded. And then they wonder why they bleed. Stoicism is the armory you never knew you had. It gives you weapons, tools sharper than steel. And once you learn to wield them, you stop being a victim of life, you become its master. Let me show you. Weapon 1. Control. The first Stoic weapon is control. Not control over the world. That's an illusion. Control over yourself. Epictetus said, "Some things are in our control, and some are not." That is the line. That is the battlefield. Everything beyond that line, the weather, the market, what others think of you, belongs to chaos. But within that line, your thoughts, your choices, your actions, belongs to you. Most people blur this line. They fight battles they cannot win. They rage at traffic. They panic at headlines. They beg for approval. It's like throwing punches at shadows. But a Stoic never wastes his blade. He fights only where he can strike. And that is why he always wins. Weapon 2. Negative visualization. The second Stoic weapon is negative visualization. It sounds grim, but it is liberation. Imagine the worst before it happens. Imagine losing the job, the deal, the person, the comfort. Not to depress yourself, to free yourself. When you picture loss, two things happen. 1. Gratitude explodes. Suddenly, the ordinary feels sacred. A hug, a meal, a sunrise, priceless. 2. Fear dissolves. Because you already rehearsed the worst. And if it comes, you are ready. This is why Stoics walk calmly into storms. They've already faced the lightning in their minds. Weapon 3. Amor Fati. The third Stoic weapon is Amor Fati. Love of fate. Not just acceptance. Love. Not, why me? But try me. Not this obstacle ruins me, but this obstacle trains me. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Think about your own setbacks. The project that failed. The breakup that crushed you. The betrayal that left you bleeding. Most people call these tragedies. A Stoic calls them training. When you love fate, you stop asking for an easy road. You start asking for a stronger back. And suddenly, nothing is wasted. Weapon 4. Emotional regulation. The fourth Stoic weapon is emotional regulation. This is the sword that cuts through chaos. Because emotions are not your enemy, being ruled by them is. Picture a CEO in a market crash. Panic is contagious. Fear spreads like wildfire. If he reacts, he loses billions. If he pauses, breathes, focuses on what he can control, strategy, discipline, vision, he not only survives, he thrives. Or picture your personal life. Someone insults you. If you explode, they own you. If you stay silent, you own them. That silence is not weakness. It is a weapon. A Stoic learns to feel deeply, but act wisely. Not a slave to anger. Not a puppet of fear. Not a fool of desire. Emotions pass. Character remains. Weapon 5. Detachment. The fifth Stoic weapon is detachment. Wealth. Nice to have. But not necessary. Fame. Enjoy it, if it comes. Ignore it, if it goes. Comfort. Accept it. But don't worship it. The Stoics called these things preferred indifference. They don't deny pleasure or fortune. They just refuse to kneel before them. Look at Warren Buffett, driving the same car, eating the same meals, living in the same modest house. Billionaire, but free from extravagance. Look at Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA, flying economy while building an empire. They had everything, yet needed nothing. That is freedom. And freedom is the sharpest blade of all. Weapon 6. Daily practice. Finally, the sixth Stoic weapon, daily practice. Because philosophy means nothing if it stays in books. The Stoics wrote journals, rehearsed death, practiced gratitude, reviewed their actions at night. They trained their minds the way athletes train their bodies. You want to be unshakable? Then practice daily. Wake up and ask, what can I control today? Face discomfort on purpose, cold showers, fasting, silence. Reflect at night. Where did I act like a king? Where did I act like a slave? Every day is training. Every moment is a drill. And with each repetition, your mind becomes steel. Do you see now why Stoicism is a weapon? It isn't passive. It isn't weak. It is active, aggressive. A philosophy for warriors, because when you use these tools, control, visualization, Amor, Fati, emotional regulation, detachment, practiced life cannot break you. You bend, but do not shatter. You fall, but rise stronger. You suffer, but suffer with meaning. And here's the truth. You don't need to be rich to wield these weapons. You don't need to be famous to practice them. You can start right now. Wherever you are, with whatever you have, the world will still throw arrows, but you will walk into battle armored, armed, and fearless. And that is why the mediocre stay weak, and why the Stoic becomes unstoppable. Let me be honest with you. Most people live and die mediocre. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack mastery of themselves. They chase comfort instead of character. They chase applause instead of purpose. They react like puppets instead of acting like kings. And here's the truth. The gap between mediocrity and greatness is not luck. It's not genetics. It's not privilege. It's mindset. It's philosophy. It's whether you pick up the weapon of Stoicism or not. Think of the workplace. You know that colleague who explodes in meetings, red-faced, offended by every criticism. Everyone tiptoes around him. He feels powerful, but really he is weak because anyone can control him with a single comment. Now picture the other type. The one who listens calmly, who doesn't take the bait, who speaks only when the room is silent and everyone leans in. That's not just confidence. That's Stoic discipline in action. Which one do you think climbs higher? Now think of personal life. You know the friend who can't be alone for a single day, constantly refreshing, constantly needing validation, living off likes and comments. They think they're connected, but really, they're chained. Now picture the one who can sit in silence, content with themselves, free of the crowd. That silence is not emptiness. It is power. The first, transformation, reaction to response. The mediocre react. The great respond. You insult the mediocre man, he explodes. You insult the Stoic, he smiles. You throw failure at the mediocre man, he collapses. You throw failure at the Stoic, he studies it. Reaction is slavery. Response is freedom. And the moment you learn to pause, to choose response over reaction, you step out of mediocrity. The second, transformation. Comfort to strength. The mediocre worship comfort. But comfort breeds weakness. They avoid pain. They avoid effort. They avoid hardship. And so life breaks them when it finally comes. But the Stoic embraces discomfort. Cold showers. Long fasts. Early mornings. Hard work without applause. Not because they love pain, but because they know pain is training. Every time you choose discomfort on purpose, you become harder to break. And soon, life cannot surprise you, because you already walked through fire. The third, transformation. Craving to clarity. The mediocre chase more money, more praise, more distractions. But the Stoic knows the truth. Craving is endless. Clarity comes not from adding but subtracting. Detach from what doesn't matter. Refuse what wastes your life. Focus only on what is in your control, what aligns with your purpose. That's why Stoics appear calm while others drown in busyness. They are not distracted. They are directed. The fourth, transformation. Setback to fuel. The mediocre see obstacles as proof they're not good enough. One rejection, and they quit. One failure, and they fold. But the Stoic sees obstacles as invitations. Amor, Fati, love of fate. Every setback is a gym. Every loss is a lesson. Do you see how dangerous that makes them? If failure cannot break you, nothing can. The fifth, transformation. Slave to master. The mediocre are slaves. Slaves to opinion. Slaves to fear. Slaves to desire. They look free, but they live chained. The Stoic is a master. Master of his mind. Master of his emotions. master of his destiny. And when you master yourself, you no longer need permission. You no longer beg for validation. You no longer fear loss. You walk into every room unshakable. Because the only power anyone has over you is the power you give them. The daily path to greatness. You want to know how to get there. How to go from mediocre to great. Start small. Practice daily. Wake up and ask, what can I control today? When anger rises, pause. Count. Breathe. Choose silence. When fear rises, visualize the worst. Accept it. Then act anyway. When failure comes, say, good. This is training. When success comes, say, good. But this too is indifferent. Journal. Reflect. Repeat. Every day, another layer of armor. Every day, another cut of steel. Greatness is not one giant leap. It is 1,000 small disciplines stacked until you are untouchable. The result. And here's the secret. When you live like this, people notice. At work, they see you calm under pressure, rational when others panic. In relationships, they see you strong, independent, yet grounded in virtue. In life, they see you free from the addictions that chain everyone else. And they call you lucky. They call you gifted. They call you great. But you will know the truth. You were once mediocre. Just like them. You just picked up the weapon they refused to touch. This is the transformation. From puppet to master. From weak to unshakable. From mediocre to great. I've shown you the problem. I've shown you why the powerful cling to Stoicism. I've placed the weapons in your hands. And I've shown you how even the most ordinary can rise to greatness. Now the choice is yours. Because philosophy is worthless if it stays on the page. Stoicism is not a book to admire. It is a way to live. And the question is simple. Will you live as a slave or as a master? We live in a world obsessed with outer freedom. Freedom of money. Freedom of lifestyle. Freedom of choice. But outer freedom is an illusion if you are chained inside. You can be rich and still enslaved to greed. You can be famous and still enslaved to opinion. You can be powerful and still enslaved to fear. And you can be poor, unknown, overlooked, and yet freer than kings. Because real freedom begins in the mind. When you master your reactions. When you control your judgments. When you live by virtue instead of craving. That is the freedom no one can take from you. So what does a Stoic life look like? It looks like calm in chaos. It looks like clarity in confusion. It looks like strength in suffering. It looks like peace in pressure. It is not glamorous. It is not loud. But it is unshakable. It is the worker who remains steady when layoffs come. It is the athlete who keeps training when the spotlight fades. It is the parent who stays patient when the world feels overwhelming. It is the leader who chooses justice when greed is easier. This is greatness. Not a title. Not applause. But virtue lived daily. And make no mistake, you will face enemies. Not armies. Not governments. But the silent assassins of mediocrity. Distraction. Temptation. Comfort. Fear. These are the forces that keep most men small. They whisper, take the easy road. They whisper, seek approval. They whisper, avoid pain. But you know better now. You know that the obstacle is the way. You know that silence is power. You know that freedom is mastery, not escape. So here is the final test. The next time you are insulted, will you react like a slave or respond like a master? The next time you lose something, will you despair like the crowd or rise with Amor Fati? The next time fear grips you, will you freeze or act with courage? Your answer to these questions will determine your life. The world does not need more men chasing applause. The world does not need more slaves to wealth and opinion. The world does not need more mediocrity dressed in comfort. The world needs men who cannot be broken. The world needs minds that stay calm when others panic. The world needs leaders who live by virtue, not vanity. And that can be you. Because Stoicism is not for the chosen. It is for the willing. It is not for the kings. It is for the slaves who choose to rule themselves. And when you rule yourself, the world cannot help but follow. So I ask you now, will you stay where you are, weak, distracted, mediocre? Or will you take up the weapon, walk into the storm, and become the kind of person the world cannot move? The choice is yours. But remember this. The world bows to the mind it cannot break. You've spent your whole life thinking power was out there, in money, in titles, in applause. But now you know the truth. The only power that matters is in here. Wealth can be stolen. Fame can fade. Comfort can vanish overnight. But a mind that cannot be broken is untouchable. That is what the Stoics knew. That is why emperors, generals, and billionaires cling to this philosophy. And that is why today you hold the same weapon in your hands. So the question is, no longer can you rise. The question is, will you? Will you keep living like everyone else, chasing, craving, breaking at every storm? Or will you step into the fire, embrace your fate, and master yourself? Because once you do, the world will bow, not to your wealth, not to your fame, but to the mind it cannot bend. Remember this, the obstacle is the way. The storm is the training, and your freedom begins the moment you decide. You will not break